بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. This is a quick overview on this course at As-Subah.com, Islam and Evolution. So these are some of the topics that are covered in the course. What is the need to study evolution from an Islamic perspective? Right? We're aware that evolution, the idea of biological evolution, there are clear conflicts between that and the Islamic position on the creation of Adam alayhi salam, the special origin of human beings, and Adam alayhi salam being the sole progenitor of humankind, right? As one scholar, Imam al-Alusi rahimahullah, said, Adam alayhi salam, the Muslim belief is that he was hadithun naw'an wa shakhsan. Adam alayhi salam was new in terms of the archetype, as in there was nobody like him before, there was no other human beings before him, and he was new as an individual, right? So that's the clear Islamic belief, but of course that conflicts with the idea of evolution when it comes to at least the origin of human beings, right? And the other aspect in which there's a conflict is where we, and this is very intuitive, very evident, we infer evidence of design. And this is an empirical inference from from what we see in the living world, right? These marvels of design within living systems could not have come about through an accidental process, but rather there must have been a being that is intelligent and powerful who foresaw or who planned ahead and put things together in a special way to make it the way it is, right? And this is not just, I mean, the evidence for that has only increased over the last few decades, but this was something that was observed by scholars and academics from centuries ago. Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah, for instance, in his Al-Munqidh min al-Dhalal, he said that they were called natural philosophers in that period, the tabi. So not as in science, what we call physical or natural science today, in those times was called natural philosophy. So he said that tabi'iyun, the natural philosophers, they are confronted with the evidence of design within, in particular, he mentioned human anatomy, or looking at the living world, al-hayawan wal-nabat. And he said, فَرَأَوْا فِيهَا مِنْ عَجَائِبِ صُنْعِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وَبَدَائِعِ حِكْمَتِهِ مَضْطُرُّ مَعَهُ إِلَى الْإِعْتِرَافِ بِفَاطِرٍ حَكِيمٍ مُطَّلِعٍ عَلَى غَايَاتِ الْأُمُورِ وَمَقَاصِدِهَا. That by studying these things, they are compelled to recognize the existence of an intelligent, wise creator who is aware of the end goals of things, as in the creator, the intelligent creator, sees where the end goal is and creates things according to that. Obviously, the idea of evolution denies that, as in there's no end goal in sight. So this is why they call it blind. Richard Dawkins calls it a blind watchmaker, in the sense that evolution is an accidental process that has no end goal in mind. It just cobbles together certain things. This idea of Darwinian evolution, it started with Charles Darwin, obviously. It's developed since then. One of the main impetus, one impetus behind it, or a big impetus behind it, was to explain away the evidence of design, right? And there's a look at that history as well in this course. And this is despite the fact even materialist biologists and scientists acknowledge that there is overwhelming evidence of design, right? Francis Crick, for example, a very well-known scientist, he said to the effect that biologists have to constantly keep in mind that what they are studying was evolved and not designed. Why do they have to constantly keep reminding themselves of that? Because the evidence of design is staring them in the face. And Richard Dawkins said something to that effect as well, that there's overwhelming, he used the word appearance of design, but obviously these scientists, what they do is they say that's just an illusion, an appearance, and we have worked out a way that these things could have come about through an accidental process, right? So where does the conflict lie between Islam and evolution? One is regarding human origins, and the other is regarding trying to explain away the clear evidence of design using some artificial premises. So one of the artificial premises that they have is something called methodological naturalism. So one scientist put it this way. He said, even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such an hypothesis is excluded from science because it is not naturalistic, right? So they basically put artificial limits on what inferences can be made from the empirical evidence. And this is a somewhat recent background assumption, right? Which is called methodological naturalism, recent meaning in the last 200 years. Darwin himself employed it. But before that, it was not the case, right? So scientists before, even before that period, even within the Western world, and also in the Islamic world, and this is also covered in the course, but scientists like Newton and Kepler, they saw explicit evidence of actual true design within the specific arrangements of things and events from what they studied, right? And they said that explicitly. So they did not operate on that premise that we have to only invoke naturalistic causes and we cannot invoke design or creation from the evidence that we see, right? And it's very strange that there are Muslims, unfortunately, who say that we should also support this artificial idea or this artificial assumption of methodological naturalism, and that is critiqued in this course. So what should Muslim attitudes towards science be? Right? And what is science within an Islamic epistemological framework? As in, where does it fall within the hierarchy of how we see things, or where we get knowledge from? Obviously, within science itself, there are things that are more robust and have more evidence and are stronger, and there are other things which are merely inferences or hypotheses or theories that may be competing with other theories where there isn't so much confidence in, right? And an important discussion is the historical and sociological context of how the background assumptions of science changed over time, and how that has shaped scientific attitudes towards biological origins, right? And that's an important discussion because, all right, we'll come back to that maybe. The course covers in some detail what is evolution, what do we mean by evolution, and making this distinction between pattern versus process, because often this distinction is made that the pattern, as in what's known as the tree of life or universal common descent, and then the process of how that occurred. And often what would be said, and this was said by some scientists, like Stephen Jay Gould and others, that the pattern is a fact and the process is a theory, or is not a fact, but is a well-established idea. But that is fallacious. That distinction is fallacious, and why that's the case is discussed in the course. And regarding the process, there's what's called the modern synthesis or neo-Darwinism, and what's called the extended evolutionary synthesis or the third way. So there's actually conflicting ideas. So obviously, the idea of evolution or materialistic evolution is that things changed over time, over millions of years, right? So land animals changed slowly, or rather animals from the sea changed slowly into land animals. And so on. Dinosaurs changed into birds over millions of years, and land animals changed into aquatic sea creatures like whales and dolphins over millions of years, right? But how did that happen? So there's different ideas amongst scientists, and they are both at odds with each other, right? And they both kind of refute each other as well. And that's the current state of affairs, and that is looked at as well in the course. And it's important to keep in mind, as I mentioned, that they are operating on a materialistic paradigm, so they are compelled to come up with certain views or hypotheses where, and this is an important discussion in the course as well, where logical possibility essentially is favored over physical possibility, in the sense that if anything is conceivable or is within the scope of imagination, the scientists will favor that over God or over creation or over intelligent design, right? Because that's just ruled out a priori. So even though the evidence of design and creation is overwhelming, they just can't entertain that. If you can't entertain that, then even the wildest of ideas becomes plausible, right? So that is explored in the course as well. A look at the evidentiary merits of evolution, intelligent design, and creationism, and also a little bit of a look at the history as well. A lot of people don't know that the co-founder, you could say, of the idea of natural selection with Darwin was well, a lot of people do know that it was Alfred Russel Wallace, but they don't know that Alfred Russel Wallace actually held a different way of looking at things. Darwin held to this idea of methodological naturalism, where you can't invoke any form of creation or design. Alfred Russel Wallace didn't. He believed that at key points within evolution and evolutionary history, which he accepts that idea, but at key points there was intervention and design that took place, right? So analyzing the logical structure of arguments for and against evolution, right? So even if we're not capable of looking at the actual scientific details, we can look at the logical structure. And this is what one of the scholars, Shaykh al-Islam Mustafa Sabri rahimahullah, from Turkey, from 100 years ago, Turkey and Egypt, he was a major scholar who had read Darwin through translation, Turkish and Arabic translation, and read many Western philosophers as well. And he presents a certain key logical flaws within the arguments for evolution, even if we're not aware of the detailed arguments or the detailed evidences, we can point out flaws in logic. Marvels of design living things, the design argument in classical Islamic theology. So there's a design argument called the Dalilul Nizam or the Dalilul Illat al-Gha'iyya, the teleological or design argument, which was articulated by Islamic theologians, and how Darwin's idea and materialistic evolution, neo-Darwinism, or even the extended evolutionary theory, the third way, how it tries to explain away that very clear evidence, right? Islam's theology of miracles. So this is an important discussion as well, regarding miracles and how do we view miracles? Khawariq al-adat or khariq al-ada, the rupturing of the norm. How do we view that, and what function does it serve? What function does it serve that there are miracles, right? So we know that there's law-like mechanisms in operation within the creation. There's regularities. But those law-like processes could either be autonomous, and this was the view of Western philosophers like David Hume, as in these things have a life of their own, in other words. So these laws just happen and they can't be violated. Or that's not the case, they're not autonomous, rather they are regularities that were designed by the creator. So if you have these two views, how do you adjudicate which one is right and which one isn't, right? The answer is through evidence of miracles. So where physical possibilities come to an end, right? As in, it's not possible adatan, physically, for something to take place, but it still took place, then you are confronted with evidence of design and creation. And it's that evidence that is being removed through these types of arguments and theories. And even not just arguments and theories, but with just a artificial rule called methodological naturalism. So there's just this artificial rule where, as a result of that, you just force yourself not to be confronted by that evidence. Right. So again, that is explored in the course, and this idea of God of the gaps, and why that is flawed, as in this is a type of argument that's used by contemporary scientists on why we have to follow this rule of methodological naturalism. And Muslims who offer novel theological interpretations to accommodate evolution and a critique. And obviously, with regards to this, there are certain extremes and more palatable ideas. So there's even the extreme idea, wal-'iyadhu billah, that Adam alayhi salam never even existed. So that whole account in the Quran is just allegorical. So obviously Muslims who propose that, they have committed disbelief and they have left Islam. And then there are other views as well. And one of the views that is looked at in some detail is that of Dr. Shuaib Ahmad Malik in his book, Islam and Evolution, his view of Adamic exceptionalism, where he proposes a certain idea of human beings already being in existence and Adam alayhi salam being specially created, yes, but then being put amongst already existing human beings. Right, so that is critiqued, and also other points that he makes in this book, Islam and Evolution, is also critiqued. It's essentially the idea of what's called theistic evolution or evolutionary creationism, where he proposes basically that evolution happened in the way that materialist scientists propose, right? It happened in that way. And as a theological or philosophical assumption, we can say it was designed, it was created, right? God did it, but that's just our theological view that's being imposed on that data or that observation. But we can't infer scientifically or empirically from the data that it was actually designed, right? So that's essentially the point of view that he argues, just like other non-Muslim religious people argue, and that's what's called theistic evolution. So Dr. Shuaib argues something to that effect, and so that is also critiqued in this course. Right, so the course is for imams, scholars, religious leaders, ordinary Muslims who are looking to find a cogent answer to how Muslims should view evolution and offer guidance or offer guidance on the subject to others. And there's no requirements. Some scientific and theological discussions may be somewhat technical and dense, but the important concepts are relatively straightforward. There's 10 hours of content, 8 recorded sessions, and it's accessible and easy to follow on the most part. And it uses both classical, like Imam al-Ghazali, and recent theologians, like Shaykh al-Islam Mustafa Sabri. As I said, Mustafa Sabri, rahimahullah, he engaged with Western philosophers as well in quite some depth. Scientific, philosophical, historical, and theological analyses, breadth of sources, and some in-depth analyses. And if we remove all of those assumptions which are faulty and which are artificial, then what is the most natural explanation of what we see in the empirical evidence? Right, so that will also be explored as well in the course, right? Okay. Right, jazakumullah khairan, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.